Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Continuing on the Hisuian speculation for Gen 9 VGC, that is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Today I want to talk about Hisuian Lilligant, which we've already discussed something of this typing. Hisuian Decidueye shares this typing of grass and fighting, which, as we talked about before, is really not a great typing. The 4x to flying is just bad to have in VGC. And it's also weak to poison, fire, psychic, ice, and fairy. Just very squishy typing. But it does at least have a fair bit of offense, having super effective stab on 7 typings. Which I actually think Lilligant handles this typing a lot better than Decidueye, and we'll get more into that later. Moving on to abilities, we still have Chlorophyll, which is very useful for something that is offensive. Own Tempo of the original is replaced with Hustle, which that is interesting, so that this thing can be very offensive. You're just chancing the low accuracy rolls if you do go for Hustle, and of course it still gets Leaf Guard. Personally, I would probably run Chlorophyll, because when we get into stats, I think Chlorophyll is going to actually help make this thing kind of viable, because the speed stat is 105 on the Hisuian form. It's actually faster than the original, which was base speed of 90. The bulk stats are the same, HP, defense, special defense. This is now a physical attacker, so the 110 special attack goes to 50, and the 60 attack goes to 105. So this thing has a fair amount of offense, but it's also quite fast. And combined with Chlorophyll, this thing would be very hard to outspeed in a Sun team. So put Torkoal beside this, and suddenly you have a threat on your hands. But the good doesn't actually stop there, because if we go into moves, this thing's signature move is Victory Dance, which is a non-attacking fighting type move that raises the user's offensive and defensive stats and increases damage dealt by the user's moves by 50%. This is a strong buffing move, and it's one of the strongest ones that I've seen, because from the looks of it, there's no trade-off. So it's more consistent to use than like Belly Drum. And depending on how much the buff actually would be, this could be a very strong move. Now my prediction is it would only raise the attack stat by 1 stage if it were in VGC. But combine that with your move's damage being increased by 50%. That is an exponential power buff. And I want to say that is higher than a Sword Stance buff. Combine that with also boosting your defensive stats, which my assumption would be physical defense. I don't think it would buff both physical and special defense in a VGC format. And you basically have bulk up combined with 50% higher damage on your moves. Which, if you think about it, that kind of gives you the buff of Hustle without actually having to run Hustle, so you can just run Chlorophyll and have the high speed advantage. But this also gets the really good offensive moves of the typings that it has. So you have Leaf Blade, that's a very good move. Close Combat, amazing move to have. And even for like a little bit of survivability, it does have Drain Punch, which depending on the meta you're in, that may or may not be useful. Most likely, that's not going to be run on this though. It does have some coverage, like Poison Jab, so it can hit grass types. I wouldn't consider Aerial Ace that good of coverage. So you do have essentially just poison coverage. But it does at least have more coverage than the original Lilligant, which I believe only has Bug as its coverage in the form of Pollen Puff. So I'm kind of seeing a build here. You use Chlorophyll in a Sun team, either Torkoal or Groudon, whichever. And there's several things you can do here. You can have very fast sleep powders, one of the fastest sleep powders in the game actually. No wait, it is the fastest sleep powder in the game. Combine that with strong offensive options like Close Combat and Leaf Blade. Probably don't need a coverage move because those moves are very strong in and of themselves. And then run either Protect or Victory Dance depending on what you're going for. Because I really could see Victory Dance just making a monster out of this. Because of Chlorophyll, it has a way of fighting around its bad typing. Like, for example, you could go for a very classic option of leading Lilligant with a fake out user and go for the fake out into the victory dance. The thing is, if your opponent reads that, you have your drought setter in the back, so that you could literally just switch it in. And now you're so fast, you're almost guaranteed to get a hit off. And better yet, you could run this focus sash too, to almost guarantee the victory dance, and then have your sunsetter out the second turn, and you get just a ton of offensive pressure just immediately. That is very hard to stop. So I think that is the most viable way of running this. You could go for hustle. I don't really think that's a great idea though, unless you want to run like some weird gravity setup or something, because the speed control of chlorophyll makes it more consistent to have than just hustle, which everything at base 80 accuracy, that's just not great to have. Now, if this were in a Dynamax meta, hustle would be great because you just Dynamax and your moves are always 100 accurate. But Gen 9 probably will not have that. If you don't have a way of guaranteeing those attacks will hit, then hustle is kind of risky and really just not consistent. So I think this could be a viable alternative to Venusaur in a Sun team, because it's faster than Venusaur, it does have a lot of offense. Even though it really cannot hit Venusaur very hard, Venusaur can actually blow this thing up. Charizard just so happens to be very strong against Venusaur, so you can definitely play around that. Charizard's also quite strong into Hisuian Lilligant too. But this thing is a big threat if you can get it set up. And even though you are having to play around a 4x weakness to flying, and it also lacks the coverage to hit a flying type, as long as you have answers to flying types in your team, this thing can cover a lot of matchups. Because normally when you're fighting a Sun team, the best drought user in the game is Groudon. And this thing scares Groudon. Groudon does not want to take a Leaf Blade. And with this thing's incredibly high speed stat, Venusaur cannot outspeed it. I don't even think a Scarf Charizard is faster than this, if it's using Chlorophyll. So it covers the Sun team matchup very well, because it is a great answer to Groudon specifically. This also is pretty good against rain teams. Anything with a fast stab close combat is always going to have some use case in the meta. This is actually a big threat to water type Urshifu as well, and it outspeeding Kyogre definitely makes it a threat to that. Hisuian Lilligant can play the glass cannon role quite well. It has the strong moves for its stabs. It has a great speed stat and it has a great ability to play around. However, I don't predict this is going to be a very popular pick, because there is that 4x to flying, which is kind of a problem. This thing is weak to fake out, especially if you want to run a focus sash build. It is possible you'll have to give up using Victory Dance to go for a more consistent build with like close combat, Leaf Blade, Sleep Powder, and Protect. That way Sleep Powder gives it a way to fight its bad matchup. You can play it as a fast sleep user. So while I do think this is a lot more viable than Decidueye, its typing is still kind of rough to play around. It does not have a lot of coverage. So this is definitely not a Pokemon you build a team around. This is, however, a Pokemon you can add to a Sun team that can cover some poor matchups or give you very aggressive options that your opponent has to respect. Because if you don't deal with this Pokemon properly, it will sweep your team. It's just the only thing you need to deal with it is like a Zapdos, and it's going to be very threatened by that. So if this thing ends up getting more coverage in Gen 9, for example, if they give it Rock Slide, this thing will be good, because then it can cover its bad matchups quite well. The high speed stat combined with Rock Slide, you get the flinch shenanigans. This thing would kind of be a monster. But currently, I think it's quite balanced. And it might even be a bit too balanced to be really common in VGC. I do predict this will show up in teams. I don't think it's going to be everywhere though. But I would not be surprised if some top 100 ladder teams end up using this. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.